Someone ran an experiment in the 1980s that should have changed everything. It didn't. And the thing it proved is quietly killing more people right now than almost any disease you are actually afraid of. The study wasn't looking for what it found. It started as a straightforward survey of health outcomes in Alameda County, California. Researchers wanted to know which lifestyle factors predicted early death. They expected the usual answers: smoking, alcohol, poor diet, sedentary living. They found all of those. And then, buried in the data, they found something that didn't fit any existing model. People who were socially isolated, who had few close relationships, who rarely saw friends, who had no community they belonged to, were dying at dramatically higher rates than everyone else. Not slightly higher, dramatically. The effect was so large the researchers assumed they had made an error. They had not. The paper came out in 1979. It was called Social Networks: Host Resistance and Mortality. The lead author was Lisa Berkman. She was 29 years old. The finding was simple, and it was devastating. Social connection predicted survival more reliably than almost any other factor they measured. Nobody knew what to do with it. The medical establishment had a framework for risk: cholesterol levels, blood pressure, tumor markers, things you could see and measure and treat with something you could prescribe. Loneliness didn't fit anywhere in that system. You couldn't biopsy it. You couldn't write it on a prescription pad. So the findings sat there in the literature, cited occasionally, acted on almost never. Meanwhile, the thing it was describing kept getting worse. To understand why loneliness kills, you have to understand what your body thinks loneliness means. Your nervous system did not evolve in the modern world. It evolved over millions of years in small groups where isolation was not a lifestyle choice. Isolation meant one thing: danger. If you were separated from your group, you were exposed. You were prey. Your body still runs that same ancient threat detection system. And when it detects that you are alone, truly, chronically alone, it does not interpret this as a preference. It interprets this as an emergency. The physiologist John Cacioppo spent 30 years trying to understand the biological mechanism. He started at the University of Chicago in the 1990s, when loneliness research was still considered a soft topic, barely worth a serious career. He didn't care. He wanted to know what was actually happening inside a lonely body. What he found was a cascade. Chronic loneliness triggers a sustained low-level activation of the body's threat response. Cortisol, the stress hormone, stays elevated. Inflammatory markers stay elevated. The immune system shifts into a configuration designed for short-term physical wounds, not long-term health maintenance. Your body is preparing for an attack that never comes. Staying braced, staying ready, burning resources it was never meant to burn continuously. Cacioppo called it the loneliness signal. It exists to motivate you to reconnect. A brief spike of loneliness is supposed to feel bad enough that you seek out other people, the way hunger drives you to food. The system works perfectly when isolation is temporary. When isolation becomes permanent, the signal never switches off, and a biological alarm system running on indefinitely does not protect you. It destroys you. The cardiovascular system takes the first hit. Chronically elevated cortisol stiffens arterial walls. Blood pressure climbs and stays up. The heart works harder for longer with less recovery. Cacioppo's research found that lonely people had significantly higher blood pressure than socially connected people with identical diets, identical weight, identical exercise habits. The social variable alone was moving the needle. Then came the sleep data. Lonely people sleep less efficiently than connected people, even when they sleep the same number of hours. They spend more time in light, restless sleep, and less time in the deep restorative stages where the body actually repairs itself. Their brains, Cacioppo found, were running a different program at night: hypervigilant, scanning, unconsciously monitoring for threats even in sleep, because the threat signal had never been turned off during the day. This is not metaphor. This is measurable. You can see it in the architecture of a sleep study. Lonely people's brains look like they are standing guard, even when the body is horizontal and the eyes are closed. Then came the immune data, and this is where the scale of the problem becomes harder to look away from. Steve Cole at UCLA ran gene expression studies on lonely and non-lonely people. He found that loneliness was actually altering which genes were being switched on and off inside immune cells. Lonely people were showing upregulation of inflammatory genes and downregulation of antiviral genes. Their immune systems were chronically prepared for bacterial infection. the kind you get from a physical wound in a fight, and chronically underprepared for viruses. The body was literally anticipating the wrong kind of threat because it was running on threat software designed for a world that no longer existed. A lonely person's immune system is fighting a battle that isn't happening while leaving the door open for the battles that are. By the time Cacioppo's full body of work was assembled in 2008, the mortality numbers were impossible to dismiss. Loneliness, not depression, not poverty, not physical inactivity, but loneliness specifically, was associated with a 26% increase in premature death. Across multiple large studies, across different countries, across different age groups, the number kept appearing. A quarter higher chance of dying early, simply from lacking the social connection the human body was built to expect. Compare that to the numbers we already accept as serious. Obesity increases mortality risk by around 20%, physical inactivity by around 30%, smoking by around 50% across a lifetime of heavy use. Loneliness sits right in the middle of that list. It kills at the same scale as the things we have entire public health campaigns, warning labels, and government programs designed to address. There are no warning labels on loneliness. Cacioppo presented these findings everywhere he could. He wrote a book in 2008. He testified before government bodies. He gave interviews and made the case repeatedly that loneliness was a public health crisis hiding in plain sight. Slowly, some researchers started to take notice. A few countries started to pay attention. In 2018, the United Kingdom appointed the world's first minister for loneliness. The appointment followed a government review that found more than 9 million people in the UK reported feeling often or always lonely. The minister's job was to coordinate a national strategy to address it. The announcement made headlines for about 2 days. Then the news moved on. The numbers, meanwhile, kept moving in one direction. In 2023, the United States Surgeon General issued an advisory. It called loneliness an epidemic. It cited data showing that more than half of American adults reported measurable levels of loneliness. It noted that even before the pandemic, rates of social connection had been declining for decades. Americans were spending 24 fewer hours per month with friends in 2020 than they were in 2003. The average number of close friends an American reported having had dropped from 3 to 1 over the same period. 1 in 5 Americans reported having no close friends at all. The advisory was thorough. It was well-sourced. It got a news cycle. Then, it joined the shelf where Berkman's 1979 paper had been sitting for 44 years. There is something almost structurally resistant about this problem. Loneliness does not have a visible symptom. It does not show up in a blood panel your doctor orders at your annual physical. It does not produce a number that goes on a chart that gets flagged by an algorithm. You can be chronically, dangerously lonely and sit across from a physician for 15 minutes and have neither of you mention it once. The visit will end with a note about your cholesterol.